In a galaxy filled with towering empires, ancient species, and vast fleets that could destroy moons, Earth had always seemed like a gentle whisper in a storm of noise. When humanity first made contact with the Galactic Union, they came not with weapons, but with open hands and bright smiles. Other species, some with centuries of warfare behind them, watched the newcomers with mild amusement. Humans were strange, too eager to share knowledge, too quick to trust, too fascinated by everything. They would walk into markets filled with dangerous tech and barter for spices. They would join scientific summits and ask innocent questions that made elder minds pause. The aliens saw them as peaceful, maybe even naive. They joked behind closed doors that humans were like clever pets, eager, friendly, loyal. And humanity never disagreed. In fact, they leaned into the image. Earth's ambassadors wore soft colors, spoke calmly, and never raised their voices. Their ships were smaller, their technology simpler, at least on the surface. In Union meetings, they listened more than they spoke. They offered help during disasters, sent doctors to plague-ridden colonies, and always stood on the sidelines during conflicts. To most of the galaxy, humans were the gentle neighbors who brought tea during troubled times. But not everyone believed the mask. A few sharp minds in the Union military officers, old war strategists, even some historians felt something was off. They would watch human behavior carefully. One admiral once said, "They learn too fast. They adapt too well." That kind of curiosity isn't harmless, it's the kind that survives. But his warnings were ignored. After all, Earth had never shown aggression. They didn't have massive fleets like the Krail. They didn't wield black hole bombs like the Onthari. And they didn't hold ancient knowledge like the Eldari. They were just friendly, helpful, soft. So when the Galactic Union ranked the threat levels of its member species, humans sat comfortably at the bottom. The only ones ranked lower were herbivore species without weapons. Earth, they said, posed no threat to anyone. And humans were content to let them believe it. Meanwhile, behind that carefully crafted image, Earth was watching, observing, recording every cultural habit, every fleet movement, every political alliance. The humans called it collecting knowledge for diplomacy, but the truth ran deeper. They were mapping the galaxy with quiet precision. Earth knew how the Union worked, how its members thought, how their ships were built, what their weaknesses were. Not because they planned war, but because they didn't want to be caught off guard. They had read history, both human and alien, and one thing was always true: peace only lasted when you were prepared to fight for it. Still, they waited. Still, they smiled. Everything changed when the Varnak Dominion appeared on the borders of the Union. Unlike most species, the Varnak didn't care for diplomacy. They believed in conquest. They had no interest in alliances or peaceful negotiation. Their fleets were strong, their soldiers ruthless, and their emperor cruel. When they started claiming neutral systems, the Union hesitated. Some called for discussion. Others urged retreat. No one wanted a war, not after the long scars left by the last one. And Earth, as usual, stayed quiet. They offered humanitarian aid to refugees, proposed peace talks, and even offered to mediate. But the Varnak weren't interested. They saw Earth's calm face and soft voice and believed what the others did. The humans were harmless. One day, a small colony on the outer edge of Union space sent a distress signal. It was a peaceful world, no military base, just farmers and scientists. The Varnak arrived in force. They burned buildings, took captives, and sent a message to the Union. This is our space now. The Union debated for days. No one wanted to send ships and risk more attacks. Earth didn't wait. Without telling the others, they sent a small fleet, just a few ships. No threats, no announcement, just action. And then silence. The Varnak ships that attacked the colony disappeared. The signals stopped. The planet was suddenly quiet. The Union thought maybe the Varnak had left. But when they sent scouts, they found something strange. No sign of the human ships, no wreckage from the Varnak. Just one transmission, buried deep in the local satellites. It said, "Do not harm the innocent." Earth remembers. That's when the questions began. The Union had always believed Earth had no real military power. Their ships were for transport, their weapons limited. So how did a handful of human vessels erase 3 Varnak warships without leaving a trace? Some said it was a bluff. Others thought it was a lucky shot. But behind closed doors, the whispers started. Maybe Earth wasn't what they claimed. Maybe they had hidden strength. The Varnak didn't hesitate. They sent a battlecruiser toward Earth's sector, ready to strike. The ship vanished too. Again, no wreckage. No beacon. Just another silent message. This is your only warning. Suddenly, the Union wasn't laughing. The species who once joked about humans being pets now held emergency meetings about the human problem. But Earth still smiled, still sent doctors, still acted friendly, as if nothing had changed. And maybe that was the most terrifying part. The galaxy realized it had misunderstood Earth completely. They weren't weak. They were waiting. And now, some invisible line had been crossed. Whatever mask humanity had worn, it had begun to slip. The silence that followed the disappearance of the Varnak warships was heavier than any explosion. In the Outer Rim colonies, rumors moved faster than ships' whispers of human ghosts, of precision strikes that left no trace, and of weapons no one had ever seen. The Varnak Dominion, proud and brutal, had never faced an enemy that didn't roar back, but simply made its enemies vanish. Their leadership was furious, confused by Earth's quiet resistance. They had expected begging, surrender, or at the very least, fear. But the humans sent no protest, no declaration of war, just silence, like a warning too quiet to ignore. In the Galactic Union, fear began to grow. The member species tried to calm the situation, but Earth didn't respond to questions. They didn't explain what happened to the missing ships. Their diplomats smiled the same way, their messages remained polite, and their people continued helping with peaceful missions, but something had changed. Something deep. Earth was now watching the galaxy with colder eyes. In the Outer Rim, trouble was only getting worse. The Varnak forces moved deeper, faster now, hoping to strike harder before the Union could organize. Colony after colony fell, and the Union still hesitated. Some species were terrified, some were arguing, and others were trying to avoid involvement. But Earth didn't wait. They began deploying small squads to threaten worlds, not as soldiers, but as security advisors. These teams wore no official armor, carried minimal weapons, and spoke softly. Yet wherever they went, the Varnak attacks failed. Sometimes entire enemy squads vanished overnight. Sometimes their ships were found adrift, their crews unconscious, systems scrambled. Earth denied involvement, but the pattern was clear. The galaxy watched as a quiet force seemed to move through space, calm and invisible, shutting down threats without leaving a trace. On one of the most vulnerable colonies, a planet named Caldor 3, a Union outpost begged for help as Varnak ships surrounded their skies. The request went unanswered by the Central Union Council, but Earth received the message and responded instantly. Within 20 hours, 5 human vessels dropped into orbit, silent and dark. The Varnak commanders laughed at the small force. Their scanners showed weak energy readings, outdated weapon systems, and low threat levels. They moved in to strike, expecting an easy victory. But the moment they crossed a certain invisible line around the colony, everything changed. The lead Varnak ship lost all power. Lights went dark, engines froze, and internal systems shut down. The crew panicked, shouting, in confusion. Then a human voice spoke calmly over their comms. You are violating protected space. Retreat or be removed. The Varnak, prideful as ever, responded with fire. They launched a full barrage at the human ships. But their missiles never reached their targets. Half exploded midair, the others simply stopped in space, frozen like statues. The humans didn't fire back. Instead, they released a pulse, a soft wave of light. And then, one by one, the Varnak ships shut down. Not destroyed, disabled. They floated like dead machines. Earth took no prisoners. No trophies. Just silence and calm orders. This colony is under Earth's protection. There will be no further warnings. The Union Council, now unable to ignore the events, called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every species gathered in shock. Earth's ambassador arrived late, quiet and unarmed. When asked to explain, the ambassador simply said, "We will not allow the innocent to suffer. If that is unacceptable, we will leave the Union peacefully." The silence in the chamber was long and uncomfortable. No one wanted to challenge them directly, not after what had happened at Caldor 3. The Varnak, however, were not finished. Furious, they declared that Earth had violated interstellar law, that humans had no right to use such tactics, and that a message had to be sent. Their emperor authorized a full invasion of a border system near Earth's claimed sector. It was meant to be a show of strength. But it became something else entirely. The human response was fast, surgical, and terrifying. Before the Varnak fleet reached the planet, their navigation systems failed. Their long-range sensors stopped working. Communications blacked out. And then, from the darkness of space, human ships appeared, not large fleets, but sleek, shadow-like vessels that didn't match any known design. They moved in silence, didn't fire traditional weapons, and yet ship after ship fell. The Varnak crews couldn't fight back. It was like facing an enemy made of smoke and mirrors. One survivor's transmission leaked into the Union network before being cut off. The message was short: "They are not what we thought. This is not the same Earth we laughed at. We made a mistake." Back in the Union, leaders sat in stunned silence. The humans had always been polite, peaceful, even friendly. But now, everyone realized the truth. Earth had never been weak. They had simply been quiet. They had learned everything about the Union, its members, its systems, and they had waited. Some called it strategy. Others called it patience. But everyone now called it power. Earth hadn't changed. They had just removed the mask they'd worn since their first step into the galaxy. As more Varnak attacks were intercepted or erased without a trace, other species began to reconsider their opinions. Some feared Earth's methods. Some admired them. A few even asked for protection, sending quiet messages to human diplomats. Earth responded with calm diplomacy, but behind every kind word was the weight of a force no one wanted to challenge again. Trouble on the Outer Rim had revealed something terrifying and beautiful at once. Humanity, once seen as the galaxy's softest species, had become its quiet guardian. They had never raised their voice. They had never started a war. But now the stars whispered their name with a new meaning. Earth was no longer the gentle hand, it was the silent shield. And everyone knew, from this moment on, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. After Earth's quiet but powerful response across the Outer Rim, something strange began happening, something even more chilling than war. Whole Varnak fleets that had been sent to threaten human-aligned systems began vanishing without warning. Not destroyed, not defeated, just gone. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. At first, the Varnak Empire refused to believe it. They assumed it was a communication failure or sensor disruption, but as more fleets went silent, panic started to grow. The Galactic Union began receiving strange reports from mining stations, transport freighters, and isolated outposts. Witnesses spoke of black shadows moving through space, silent shapes that appeared from nowhere, hovering near ships for minutes before the vessels simply disappeared. There were no signs of struggle, no explosions, just silence and then nothing. These stories were dismissed as fear-driven hallucinations until a Union surveillance post recorded actual footage of a massive Varnak destroyer being surrounded by 5 unknown vessels with no known design. The ship was last seen surrounded by these strange crafts, and then the footage cut to static. No trace of the destroyer was ever found again. The Union leadership called an emergency session demanding answers from Earth, but once again, the humans denied any knowledge of the disappearances. Their ambassador spoke calmly, saying Earth did not wish for war and had no reason to attack. But their eyes held something deeper, something the other species couldn't read, something ancient and unreadable. Behind closed doors, Earth's own high command was silent too. Not even the Union's most advanced spies could learn what Earth was planning or how they had developed such quiet control. The mystery became worse when the largest Varnak fleet, 30 ships strong, was sent to invade a small moon that recently received aid from Earth. The fleet entered the system with full force. Union sensors tracked their arrival. But then, within a single minute, not a single ship remained. The moon's surface showed no signs of battle. It was as if the fleet had been swallowed by space itself. Now, fear turned into chaos. Even Varnak's allies began to distance themselves, sending quiet envoys to Earth requesting peace. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed Earth had created a weapon that could erase matter from reality. Others thought humans had unlocked an ancient force lost to time. A few even believed that Earth had made a deal with something not of this galaxy, something older and hidden. The truth was unknown, but one thing was certain: Earth no longer needed armies to win battles. Their silence was more powerful than any weapon, and their absence more terrifying than their presence. One by one, powerful species who once ignored or mocked humanity now approached Earth with caution, offering peace treaties and trade deals. And Earth, still calm and diplomatic, welcomed them without arrogance. But the disappearances did not stop. A special investigation team from the Union, made of neutral species known for their honesty and knowledge, was sent to one of the locations where a fleet vanished. They entered the system slowly, cautiously, with every sensor active. What they found was worse than any theory. The space around the system felt wrong. Instruments failed. Light itself seemed to bend strangely. Time readings fluctuated. And then they found the wreckage, not of the missing Varnak ships, but of something else. Unknown technology, melted into fragments, floating in a frozen pattern like a warning left behind. The investigators returned with only one working data core, which showed a short clip, an enormous dark shape, larger than any ship ever seen, hovering in the distance, watching. It had no lights, no windows, and no clear structure, just a smooth, black surface that absorbed all light. The data ended with a single pulse that disabled every device instantly. When shown to the Union Council, the room went silent. No one spoke. The humans, when asked about it, only replied, "We do not speak of what sleeps beyond the veil." That answer, quiet as it was, shook the entire chamber. No further explanation came. Now, even Earth's allies began to fear what might be hiding behind the human calm. Was it really just Earth's own power? Or had humanity awakened something else, something that now moved under their command, unseen and unstoppable? More systems reported missing ships, strange shadows, and pulses of static that crashed entire stations. But Earth kept smiling, kept sending aid, kept rescuing civilians from attacks, and continued to talk peace. That was what terrified everyone most. Because the humans didn't threaten. They didn't warn. They simply watched. And if they chose to act, no one ever saw it happen. The Varnak Dominion, once a name that struck fear into entire sectors, was now silent. Their homeworld locked its gates, pulled its ships back, and sent no further forces into human territory. They refused to comment on the disappearances, and some whispered that even their leaders were now afraid to speak of Earth at all. In the heart of the Union, fear turned into respect, and respect turned into quiet obedience. Earth had not become a conqueror. They had become something else entirely, something you did not cross, not because they would strike you down, but because you wouldn't even know how or when they did it. The galaxy was changing. The old powers were fading. And in their place stood a species that had been underestimated. Humanity had worn the mask of peace for years, learned everything about its neighbors, and waited. Now the mask had slipped, and what was beneath it was not cruelty, not revenge, but something much more controlled and terrifying: the cold, calculating strength of a species that knew exactly how to fight a war without ever calling it one. The disappearances continued, each one a quiet message that echoed across the stars. And every species, no matter how proud or powerful, now understood the unspoken truth: when Earth moves in silence, even the stars go quiet. Across the galaxy, silence had taken root like a slow-growing storm, invisible but deeply felt by every species that once looked down on humanity. Whispers filled the high halls of the Galactic Union and trembled in the minds of ancient empires now questioning everything they believed. Earth had remained quiet, peaceful in its words, generous in its actions, and helpful in every diplomatic mission. But behind that calm face, there had always been something hidden, something waiting. And now, without warning, that hidden truth began to rise. It started with the return of the investigation team who had first seen the black shape in deep space. The data they recovered shook the minds of even the bravest warriors. That dark vessel, silent and still, had no heat, no life, no signal, and yet it moved. Not like a machine, but like something alive. As fear grew, several species united secretly to confront Earth, believing they could force an explanation. They called an emergency council and demanded the presence of the human ambassador. The ambassador arrived without guards, without fear, smiling as always, wearing a plain suit and calm expression. But something was different in his eyes. Not anger, not pride, just tiredness, like someone who had waited too long for the obvious to be seen. When the accusations were thrown, the ambassador listened quietly. They blamed Earth for the disappearances, for the strange shadows, for the growing fear. And then, without raising his voice, he spoke. You feared the monsters at your borders. You feared weapons and fleets and power. But you never feared knowledge. That was your mistake. His words were calm, but the room felt colder. He stood and looked at every representative. We asked for peace. We warned you not to test us. We joined your union, followed your laws, respected your traditions. But all you saw was weakness. You wanted to know what Earth was hiding. Now you will. With a single tap on his wrist device, the walls of the council chamber lit up, and everyone turned to the massive screen surrounding the hall. At first, they saw only stars. Then, shapes began to appear, large ones, countless in number. Shadows moving in the void, vast and silent, blocking out constellations like blotches of ink on ancient maps. The ambassador continued, his voice now distant and cold. These are not warships. They are watchers. They are what protects us. They are what you woke up. The screens changed again, this time showing one of the unknown shapes from earlier footage now floating above a Varnak planet, completely unnoticed. Then, in less than a second, the planet's orbit shifted, and the planet itself fractured like glass, breaking apart in slow silence. Gasps and cries filled the chamber, but the ambassador did not flinch. We did not want this. But you made your choice. Then he turned to leave, and in that moment, the room understood. Earth had been hiding not weapons, but something far older and ancient force, perhaps created or discovered, or maybe something humans had made a deal with. Something not bound by physical laws or technology. Something beyond reason. As the ambassador exited, Union leaders rushed to cut signals, to hide the broadcast, but it was too late. Every major system had seen the footage. Every leader knew now that the mask had truly fallen. Earth had never been tame, never been weak. They had simply been waiting for the galaxy to show its true face. And now, Earth had shown theirs. Across star systems, entire fleets were grounded. Emergency councils were called. Treaties were rewritten. The Varnak, once proud and cruel, locked their skies and buried their communications in fear. Earth did not issue any threats. They made no demands. They simply stopped hiding. That alone was enough to freeze the galaxy in its tracks. On the edge of known space, where strange stars burned dim and forgotten ruins drifted in eternal orbit, new lights appeared, shapes that no telescope could focus on. Old warnings carved into the walls of ancient alien tombs began to make sense. Warnings of a species that came late but learned fast. Warnings of a race that would unlock doors that should never be opened. And now those doors stood wide open. In secret, smaller species gathered to discuss their future. Some wanted to submit, others to run, and a few brave or foolish ones spoke of resistance. But they all knew the truth: there was no resisting something you could not even see coming. Earth remained calm, as always. Their leaders made no speeches. Their fleets stayed in orbit. Their diplomats kept smiling. But now, behind every friendly word and handshake, everyone could feel the shadow that followed them. The humans no longer needed to fight. The galaxy had finally seen the truth. The mask had fallen, and behind it was not a monster, not a god, but something far worse to those who once believed they ruled the stars, a species that learned, adapted, and waited. And now, their time had come. In the silence that followed Earth's reveal, the galaxy no longer looked at humans the same way. For so long, they had seen humanity as the newcomers, eager, helpful, and too soft for the cold brutality of space. But that illusion had been shattered, not with an invasion, not with a threat, but with a quiet show of power no one could understand or explain. Now, every spaceport went still when a human ship entered orbit. Where once humans were ignored or pitied, now they were watched with wide, cautious eyes. Whole governments restructured their military protocols just in case Earth changed its mind. Children were no longer taught that humans were harmless. They were taught that humans were unknowable. And while fear took hold of many, something else began to grow quietly, side by side with that fear, respect. Not respect born of politics or deals, but something deeper, something that came when one realizes they had been standing beside a volcano, mistaking it for a hill. And still, Earth said nothing. They made no demands, offered no explanations, and didn't move a single ship from its orbit. The ancient species, those that had ruled the stars for thousands of years, gathered in private, struggling to understand how the balance had shifted so completely without a single shot being fired. Some wanted to act, to find ways to test Earth again, but wiser ones remembered the destruction of the Varnak world quick, silent, and final. It had not been an attack. It had been a demonstration, a message, and everyone had received it loud and clear. Out in the darker corners of the galaxy, explorers and scientists began to review ancient data, trying to find hints about how humans had become what they were. They looked at Earth's short timeline and found it unbelievable how a species had risen from fire and steel to starships in just a few generations. Many believed that humans had help, that they had found something buried deep on their planet or made contact with forces that should never have been awakened. But none of the theories explained the way those dark vessels moved, or how they erased planets without leaving a trace. No technology, no radiation, no logical explanation, just disappearance. And that was the part that made the fear so heavy. It wasn't just Earth's strength. It was the mystery, the unknown. For all their spying, studying, and analysis, no one really knew how far humans could go, or if there were limits at all. The most powerful species, once proud and unchallenged, now held emergency meetings under hidden stars, whispering about peace, about surrender, about survival. But humans didn't ask for war. They didn't even answer most of the calls. They simply returned to their quiet routines, working, exploring, and building. And that was perhaps the most terrifying thing, that humans had dropped the mask, and yet they still smiled, still spoke softly, still lived like nothing had changed. Because for them, maybe it hadn't. Maybe the mask had never been for hiding power, but for giving the galaxy a chance to behave. In hidden bunkers beneath planetary surfaces, military leaders argued over how to protect themselves. Some believed the only chance was to form an alliance with Earth, to beg for inclusion in whatever system the humans would create. Others, more prideful, spoke of resistance, of building new weapons. But those voices faded quickly after a second planet, small, uninhabited, and once used as a weapons testing site, was erased. No message, no warning. It simply vanished, reduced to cold dust, drifting through space. The signal was clear. Earth knew what others were planning before they acted. They were watching, and they didn't tolerate threats. That second disappearance pushed even the boldest races into silence. Across the galaxy, new laws were quietly passed: bans on human surveillance, protections for humans traveling through alien space, diplomatic immunity for every human envoy. Respect was no longer a choice. It had become a law of survival. But despite all the fear, there was something else growing too: curiosity. Some races began to see humans not as monsters, but as something new, an evolution of what intelligent life could become if pushed hard enough by history, pain, and determination. Those who approached humans without hatred were met with peace, shared knowledge, and even protection. It became clear that Earth didn't want to rule. They wanted balance. They wanted a galaxy that didn't force anyone to wear masks. A galaxy where no one had to pretend. But they were also ready to fight for that balance if needed. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Union, forgotten texts were now being read again. Old warnings left behind by civilizations that vanished without explanation. Stories of a sleeping race that would rise late but reshape everything. Words that once seemed like myth now matched every sign. And more disturbing was the final line in one of those texts, written in a language that had no known translator until Earth decoded it within hours. That line read, "When they come with silence, the stars will learn fear again." The Union's elders held emergency meetings in secrecy, debating whether to release this translation. In the end, they did not. The fear was already enough. But across the stars, among all the dread, a quiet truth spread. Humanity had brought a new fear to the galaxy, but also a new order. Where once warlords and empires ruled through fear and fire, now fear itself had changed direction. And those who respected Earth were protected by that very fear. Peace began to grow not out of love, not even out of hope, but out of understanding that the galaxy was now balanced on a new scale. A scale held by hands that had once been ignored. A species that had survived everything their own planet had thrown at them, and now stood calm in the chaos of the cosmos. The galaxy watched. Watched as Earth expanded, not through war, but through trust, forming quiet alliances, sharing knowledge, helping rebuild broken worlds. And slowly, species began to speak the name, human, not with fear alone. Because now they understood. Earth was not a conqueror. It was a reminder. A lesson. That even the quiet ones, even the latecomers, even the species seen as soft could one day show a strength that rewrote the stars. A strength that did not destroy, but protected. That did not scream, but warned. That did not demand, but earned. Earth had brought a new fear. But with it came a new respect.